Hello, welcome. Today we're going to be going over basics of how combat actually works and resolves in Hoi4. So let's just start with the basics of combat. So we're going to attack in here. We have 2 divisions versus 2 divisions. And we'll start by going over how these modifiers work. One thing you should note, night does not impact defense or breakthrough. Paradox has decided that defending or attacking at night is no better or worse than attacking or defending during the day for the purpose of avoiding getting hit. Your ability to do damage, though, does take a minus 50% penalty, something that can be improved through the tech. There is a tech here, late game tech. You can reduce that penalty by half. Or with the Grand Battle Plan tech, you can literally get rid of it, having done all 3. And when you get that bonus, it's just additive, so you'd get minus 50, plus 25, plus 10, plus 15. Now, these modifiers are multiplied together. With the exception of maybe the attacker tactic damage, some people suggest that the attacker tactic damage, which shows up here and does actually affect your final soft attack value, doesn't actually do anything. Here, they suggest it does stuff at the end of the calculation, and we'll go through the calculation. So if we pull up a calculator and we take the base value of 117.9 and we just multiply it by 0.95 for the terrain value, 0.5 for the night value, and then 0.9 for the attacker tactic damage, that gives us 50.4. There's clearly something getting truncated in there, probably on the actual percent itself. If we just redo the percent itself, yeah, it's cutting off that 5. But that doesn't really matter, it's negligible. So that gets you your soft attack value. When it comes to these modifiers, there's many different sources of them. You have your generals, you have your high command, you have planning bonus, you have terrain providing negative penalties, night providing negative penalties. It's important to remember that modifiers of the same type are additive. So you see how we have 20% from commander skill? That is 12.5% from Charles de Gaulle. And then it's saying 15% here, but because he's a field marshal, we're getting half of that. So that's another 7.5% added together gets you that 20%. If we appoint an army offense guy, and then also we're using infantry, so let's see if we have an infantry guy. We don't have an infantry guy. Let's go make one real quick. So I made ourselves an infantry leader. That's going to give us another 5% attack. So we're going to get a 15 attack from our high command. This is going to be considered country. I'm even going to put up our war support. So that's going to give us another 9%. So if we let a little bit of time pass, so we have the country modifier of 24%. So that's what we see here. We see this dude plus that dude. So 15% plus our 9% here, giving us 24% for country. Now, an important thing to realize when it comes to these modifiers is because of their multiplicative nature, it is much more important to get rid of the negative ones than to add more positive ones. When you have small bonuses, so like 0.95 times 1.05, so you have a 5% penalty, 5% bonus, they largely cancel each other out. But when you start moving away, so like we're getting a minus 30% from terrain, if we multiply that by 1.3, you're at 0.91. We would need a 42.8% bonus to cancel out the 30% terrain, which is basically our entire planning bonus. So it is very important to get rid of those negative modifiers if you can. So like if you're going to be fighting in a lot of bad terrain, using a flame tank, if it's got the appropriate modifiers, very important. You can't really avoid the night penalty, but using marines for naval invasions or AM tanks, or for trying to get across rivers, they will help tremendously, especially for large rivers, because the larger rivers, which are really hard to tell on the map, give a minus 60% penalty. The smaller rivers only give a minus 30% penalty. So getting rid of that penalty is very important. Stacking the rest of the bonuses are nice and all, but trying to limit those penalties is going to do quite a bit for you in the long run. Now let's go to the day. Let's do it from the defender's perspective. They have 115 soft attack, and they're going up against somebody with 70 breakthrough. 69 breakthrough might as well be 70. These values, they get divided by 10 in round, and it's likely that it's doing it stochastically. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's quite simple. Here, let me pull up paint. I'll draw what it does. So let's say you have 0.6. The rounding that is likely happening is 60% of the time, it'll round to 1. 40% of the time, it's going to round to 0. And in the long run, which all of these combats are, there are tons and tons of calculations happening every single day. This will end up averaging to 0.6. So that's likely the rounding that is involved in here. This sort of rounding is used in air combat, so there's no reason they wouldn't also use it in land combat, especially given that they are dividing values by 10. So if you have 75, you're going to get 7.5. You need to round that better than just rounding that to 8. And this is a better method. So that's likely how this rounding is working. Now, how do I actually show you guys how this math works? Actually, I think I can write on the screen. With no step back, there was a new fancy coordination mechanic that was introduced, which means this division will attack this one and that one at the same time through coordination. What this does is establishes a primary target and then the rest are secondary target. The one with the lower percentage of org is going to be the primary target of all of the divisions that can be selected. In this case, there are only 2 enemies and our divisions are the same size, so they can always select 2. The number of divisions you can select is capped at 2 times your combat width. So 18, you'd be capped at 32, they're using 32, so you can select both of them. This does mean you can abuse it though. So this division can only select 32 combat width. If I go over to the British, give them a division that is 40 combat width. We'll do 42. We'll just do a standard 15 and 4. Okay, so we have our division in place. So if we attack with these divisions, we have this division which is at full org. And then we have 2 other divisions. And if we let this combat go, this division's org is not dropping. You know why? It is too large for any of these divisions targeting. They can only target 32 width, and because there is a division in combat that they can actually select within that width, they will select it. So this division will take 0 damage. At no point in time will this division ever take damage because it's greater than their ability to target. Now, this does obviously have limits. You know, once you get to a 25 width, you can target 50 width. So it's not really going to work unless your opponent is using small divisions. But if your opponent's using 15 widths, they can only select up to 30. So as long as you have a 32 width division or larger, that division will literally never take damage as long as there's another division that is smaller in combat with them. So that's a little trick you can do. Alrighty, I'm just going to get rid of that division real quick. In circumstances where there is a division too large to be selected, if there is no division that is small enough to be selected, they are just going to randomly select one, and then they're going to attack it. But if there's a division small enough to be selected, they will select that one. They always do. Okay, so let's go back to this combat. Right now is a good pause point. The top division has 110 attack. Let's go back to drawing. So when you're selecting 2 divisions, and I believe I have 10% coordination right now with the base of 35 giving me 45 coordination. So both these divisions are going to take a secondary attack. And then this division, with its substantially lower org, is going to take a main attack. That is because it has a lower percentage of its total org compared to the other division. So the division taking the main attack is going to take a 0.35 plus 0.1 times our initiative. Now this 0.1 is because we have 1940 radio tech, so that's going to give us 10% bonus coordination. That bonus coordination is multiplied by your initiative, which we don't have any, and that is added to your base of 0.35, which gives us a coordination of 0.45. This is the percent of our attack that is going to be directed at the main target. So 0.45, that's what's going towards the main target, which means we have 0.55, which is being split between the 2. We're going to divide that by 2, and that's going to give us 0.275 per target, which means the primary target is actually getting this number on the left here and that one. They're going to get added together, which means the primary target's actually going to get 72.5% of your attacks, and the secondary target is going to get 27.5% of your attacks. It's why coordination isn't that big of a deal when you're not selecting many targets, because for every point you're transferring from your secondary attacks to your primary attacks, losing half of that going towards your primary target. So it's only half as effective as you think it is. So that's part of the calculation. But there is a second part of this calculation. But here we have 0% hardness. And the calculation for that is quite simple. This is the formula for your attacks. You have your soft attack times 1 minus hardness, and then you have your hard attack times hardness as your weighted average for your attacks. So in this instance, we have 0% hardness, so this part just gets removed, and we get 100% of soft attack. But if you had a division that was 70% hardness, you would get 70% of your hard attack and 30% of your soft attack. That's part of why tanks take so little damage, because tanks have 79% hardness, but soft attack is much easier to come by. Infantry largely only provide soft attack. So on top of potentially being armored, they just take less attacks in general. So once you have this number, that can get multiplied by your damage factor. Now your damage factor is what we were just talking about with coordination. So this is your damage factor for secondary targets. Damage factor for your main target is literally just 1 minus your damage factor for secondaries, or just this part. So for what we're doing right now, that this is going to equal 0.275, and then this is going to equal 0.45, but this is going to go towards both targets. So you take this number, which is the weighted average of these two, multiply it by this number for secondary targets, or this number plus this number for your main target, equaling 0.725 in this instance. So we're going to deal 0.725 of our division's attacks. Well, this division here has 110. Pull up a calculator for that. 110 times 0.725 is 79.75, about 80. This number gets divided by 10, and it rounds probably based on percentages. So, 97.5% of the time, this would round up to 8. We take this number and we compare it to their approximately 70 breakthrough. With 70 breakthrough, that also gets divided by 10, the same way this does. So we're basically going to end up with 8 attacks versus 7 breakthrough, right? Wrong. We need to multiply this by 2. All attacks against the same target get summed, and this division is going to attack this target, this target as its main target. So they're going to sum their main targets. They have the same stats for all intents and purposes. Let's just treat them like they have the same stats. So they're going to get 16 attacks, and these guys have 6.5 defense against those attacks. So what does that mean? Well, when you have defense, you have 6 attacks times 0.1. Those are your defended against attacks. That's only going to bring us down to, let's say, 9. Let's say that rounded up to 7. Let's say this rounds up to 7, actually. So that's probably going to give us another 9 attacks left. Those attacks have a 40% chance of hitting. That is called critting by most people. You're doing effectively 4 times more damage because you're 4 times more likely to hit. If we pull up our calculator, we get 0.7 plus 9 times 0.4, which gives us 4.3 attacks are likely to hit. That's not very good, but it's something. There's a dice roll. For orc damage, there's a 4-sided die. So an average value for that is 2.5. We're also going to multiply by 0.9 because the second you are under 100%, you're treated as though you're at 90% strength, and that is the damage multiplier. And that keeps going down. If you're at 55% strength, you're doing 0.5. And then you get multiplied by 0.053 for orc damage, and you take away the 3 for strength damage. Let's just do that math real quick. That's going to give you, on average, 0.51 orc damage per tick. A tick is an hour. That's how that all works. Now, obviously, you're going to want to limit the number of secondary targets you have, because I actually did this math for you. This is actually equal to 55 divided by 2. If we actually, divided this by 55 divided by 3, well, that's 18. 0.813 plus 0.45 is 0.63. That is 87% less damage on your primary target. And given that the enemy has 7 defense, these attacks are never going to overcome their defense. So they're going to do negligible amounts of damage. You need those attacks over defense. And that's what we have here. And that's why you really want to limit this to as low as you can. Select as few as possible, within reason. That's why I prefer 30 with tanks over 42. 42 with tanks can select up to 84 combat width. 30 widths can only select up to 60. That's the difference between selecting 4 20 widths versus selecting 3. Or if you're going up against 40 widths, you're only going to select 1. This only works if you're selecting multiple targets. If the enemy has larger divisions than you, you will only ever select 1, and you'll direct all of your attacks towards it with a single division, and then the other divisions will randomly do that. And there are instances where that will actually increase your damage output, even though shrinking your division would have reduced your attack value. Oh, and also, there are people who suggest this is where tactics damage applies. So if we have a tactic that says we do, 15% more, then you'd multiply by 1.5 here. I don't know if that's true, because it clearly shows it showing up here in the UI. I don't know why they'd show it here in the UI, modifying all this math, if it's not going to get applied here. Because it really looks like they're just taking these numbers here and plugging it into a formula that sort of looks like this. This is not quite how the game does it. It's much easier for us to understand it, but the game does it like pass by pass by pass by pass. So, if you have 16 attacks at a target, it processes each one individually and it rolls a 4-sided die. So it's a little bit more complicated, but this will approximate the result based on the expected value of those die rolls. So that's coordination and how damage is calculated. It's also why this value, which is called breakthrough in this screen, is treated as defense, because in this calculation, this 7 defense, that was actually the breakthrough value I was using. But internally it's called defense. So any modifiers from your generals, your high command, your experience, they will affect breakthrough as well as defense when they say defense. I know, there's like 6 different things that refer to defense, and all of them are slightly different. So that's how combat works. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.